Hi everyone, I'm Madison. Thank you for clicking on my channel. In today's video, I am going to be giving you some fall book recommendations. I'm actually going to be giving them to you by genre. So the first genre is going to be romance. Okay, so the first book that I'm going to tell you guys about, I've mentioned a ton in videos, and that is Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. It's a 5-star read for me. I read this book like 2 years ago, and I still think about it all the time. It's the book that I recommend to all of my friends whenever they ask me, what book do I recommend to get into reading? This is always it. It is a second chance romance. It is about two people, excuse me, that live next to each other in dorms. Sorry if you hear noise. The boys are chewing on their bones, and they're being quiet, so we're just gonna leave them be. But this is about two people that live next to each other, like dorm-wise, and a friendship ensues, and then a relationship does, and then you get the present timeline, and they haven't spoken to each other in 15 years, and you're trying to figure out why. And this is also dual POV, which is so nice, especially for a second chance romance. I love this book so much. I will always recommend it, and it kind of gives fall vibes, and because it's like academia, because you get the college background, and it's also set in New York City. So yeah. The next two books that I recommend are actually part of a trilogy, yeah. Are part of a trilogy. The third book is not out yet, but that is Butcher and Blackbird and Leather and Lark by Bryn Weaver. This author writes like rom-com dark romance, so they are a little bit gory, and there are a ton of trigger warnings noted at the beginning of the book for both of these, but it's lighthearted and funny, but also has the serial killer aspect to it, because this one is about two serial killers that fall in love with each other, and this one is a marriage of convenience about a contract killer and a serial killer. So yeah, just kind of gives fall vibes. You get like the thriller aspect of them, you know, kind of being criminals, and they are, of being criminals, but then you also get the romance. And I think it's a fun read for both of these. A lot of people adore Butcher and Blackbird, and I really like Leather and Lark myself. So I think these would be great fall reads if you haven't already gotten to them. The next book, it's really like a series. I have the bind up of it, and that is Mindfuck, the Mindfuck series by S.T. Abbey. This book, it's actually a compilation of 5, and it is a dark romance series, and it is about a serial killer and a detective, and he is on her case, but they are actually building a relationship together, and he has no idea who she is. And the FMC is the serial killer. I'm sure you heard about this series a lot, and if you haven't, I highly recommend this one. It definitely has more trigger warnings. I don't know if there's any listed in the front of the book, but I would just, no, there's not, but I would definitely recommend like researching some trigger warnings, because it is intense, but it's a great dark romance, and great for the fall Halloween season, just to kind of get into it, but there's still romance involved. So I love this book. I love this bind up series so much. Okay, so the last romance that I have is one that I just finished reading, and that is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. It's a romance between a vampire and a werewolf. Of course, I'm going to recommend this in a fall book recommendations. It's literally what it says. If you are a fan of vampire and werewolf, AO3, or Wattpad, you're gonna like it. If you are a big fan of Vampire Diaries or Twilight or whatever, you're gonna like it. It's fun. It's funny. The main character is very witty, sarcastic. I love her. She's iconic. So I recommend this. Even if you aren't like a big paranormal romance fan, like I wasn't super into it, it was still a really good read, so like I highly recommend. Okay, the next genre that I recommend is lit fic, just general fiction. And I only have 2 books in this because I wanted to kind of keep it down. I also don't read a lot of lit fic besides Greek myth. Speaking of Greek myth, I had one book that I definitely recommend. I read a lot of popular Greek myths, so I didn't want to put those as recs. But this one I don't feel like gets a lot of talk, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clark. I read this book last year. Loved this book. I did read it in the spring, but I definitely recommend reading it in the fall. It's just got, I'm sorry, I keep touching my hair. It's just got, you know, magical realistic vibes to it, like magical realism, because it's a modern twist on the labyrinth, and it's kind of a confusing mystery. It's so good. I don't want to like spoil too much of it, but the labyrinth is Piranesi's home. It's where he lives. If you know anything about Greek mythology, you'll know about the labyrinth. Very interesting. It's so good. I'm just going to leave it at that. I kind of want to keep you in the dark about it because this story is just so good. But I definitely recommend it if you are a fan of books like Circe, Ariadne, what's that one other book by Madeline Miller, Galatea. If you like those, I definitely recommend reading this one. Song of Achilles is a little too romance heavy, but if you liked the other aspects of Song of Achilles that weren't romance, you will enjoy this book. I always recommend picking up a Greek myth in the fall. The other book that I have to recommend, I did not rate very highly, so you might be surprised as to why I'm recommending it, but I think there's a time and a place for it. And there's a certain person that will like this book. It just was not me, personally, but that is Rouge by Mona Awad. Mona Awad is a literary fiction author that kind of touches on topics in like a creepy horror-esque way. If you read like Bunny by Mona Awad, you would know that it's kind of like, her books are kind of like a mindfuck. I think that's the best way to put it. I have not read Bunny, but I have heard so many people say stuff like that. That's kind of just her writing style. This is Rouge. Rouge is about a girl. Her mother had just passed away, and this makeup company called Rouge just kind of starts to entice her. She's like super into skincare, like crazy about it. That's kind of all I can really say about it. I know it's kind of a take on the outrageous standards of the beauty industry. It's a weird way to get there, but it's a weird read. And if you're into that, this would be a great pickup in the fall. So yeah, the next genres that I have are thrillers / horror novels. I've only read one horror book, so I only have one to recommend. Now, if you know, I hate thrillers. Yeah, I don't know why. The genre just doesn't really entice me. I'm very particular about my thriller books if I am to read one, but I do have a few that I recommend. The first thriller I'm going to give you guys is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. Sure. Michaelides? Because I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I should really figure that out. Nonetheless, I do really like this book. It has Greek undertones to it. If it has Greek undertones to it, I'm going to read it. If you know, you know. I love Greek mythology, as I've talked about multiple times, and just Greek elements in general. But this thriller is so interesting. It was a little predictable, I will admit, but his writing style keeps you interested the entire time, and I really enjoyed that. And this is about a woman, and I believe her niece is in school, and they're at the school for some reason, and yeah, that's all I remember, if I'm gonna be honest. I just remember enjoying the writing. That is awful, but it was a good book, and I highly recommend it. The next thriller that I have is actually by Riley Sager, and that is The House Across the Lake. I have read a few of his books. I've read Final Girl's this one, and I've read half of Lock Every Door and Put It Down. This one I really enjoyed. This one actually kept me interested the entire time. The story was a little weird, so I wanted to know what was going to happen next. The characters were not very likable, but they weren't absolutely irritating that I couldn't get through the story because they were just so annoying. Because that's my issue with thrillers most of the time. But I liked the main character for the most part in this book. I liked the other characters and I wanted to know what was going to happen. The ending is kind of stupid in my opinion because the book, it just took a turn that I didn't expect it to take. A little unrealistic in my opinion. Personal problem, but overall I really did enjoy the book and I did listen to it on audio. So I highly recommend that. Okay, so the next two thrillers that I have as recommendations are YA series. You're probably gonna guess what they are. The first one being A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, this series. I've actually not finished it. I still haven't read the last one. But I like the first two, especially the first one. I found this one probably the most interesting. It's good. It's now a TV show as well, so if you like this, then you also have a show that you can watch. It's just about a girl named Pip, and she's doing her senior capstone project, and she does it on a semi-unsolved murder that occurred in her town, and yeah, she's trying to debunk it. I love it. It's so good, and fast-paced, easy to read or listen to. I listened to this one also on audiobook. That's how I consume most thrillers. And enjoyable. It's cute, it's YA, it's not too intense, so it's easy to get through. Next and last YA thriller that I have is The Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is my first Jennifer Lynn Barnes book and series in general, and needless to say, I adored this. It was so good, and it's pretty much YA Criminal Minds. Criminal Minds is a comfort show for me. I have rewatched it 4 times, so yeah, I love it. I love Sloane in this book. She's adorable. I am, and forever will be, Team Michael. Why, I don't know, but I love love triangle in it. Just read it. Seriously, just read it. When I said YA Criminal Minds, you should have already gone on your phone and purchased it. So yeah. So the last book that I have is a horror. It is the only horror that I've read, but I do recommend it. And that is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. It's out there, it's weird. It's set in Charleston, South Carolina, and it is about a housewife in, I believe, the 70s? Sure, we're gonna go with the 70s. And everybody in the town knows everybody. Her book club hangs out and they gossip and they talk about books. They read thrillers and horrors and all that fun crime stuff. And a guy moves in that they've never met before. And they're suspicious of him because he does some weird things. He doesn't go out in the sun. He is just a little weird. But yeah, I highly recommend it. It's a bit of a weird read, but it's not super creepy. It's not super gory. I recommend it. The last genre that I'm going to talk about is fantasy. Fantasy is peak in the fall and winter time. And these are my fall fantasy recommendations. I could list so many that I have read, but these are my top recs. So the first fantasy novel that I have is a standalone, which is nice because you don't really have to get deep into a fantasy novel, and that is Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. I've seen a lot of people wanting to read this, but I have not seen anybody really picking it up. I really enjoyed it. It's a bit out there, but I feel like that's kind of how Olivia Blake's writing can be. It's just a bit out there. She's very descriptive with her writing, but also very knowledgeable with how she goes about writing books, and I really appreciated that. There's a lot of appreciation to be had for Olivia Blake's writing in this book. Yeah, this book is about a vampire real estate agent trying to sell a home, but the home that she's trying to sell is haunted by a ghost, and he is wreaking havoc. Along with this, her best friend is a demon, and introduces our vampire friend, her name is Viola, to this group of others that are not humans. And they kind of just go about that life. And then on top of that, there is the Son of Death, and he is immortal. He is the Son of Death, and so death is in the book, the sun is in there, archangels are in there, the members of Lucifer's army are in there. It's got a lot of potentially religious elements in there, but also a lot of imagery and just like descriptions of the archangels and heaven and earth and hell, and it's done, in my opinion, tastefully. I really enjoyed this, but it also was done in a way that makes you really think. Personally, I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars. The story itself is odd, but it's really good. I don't want to continue to ramble too much about it, but I highly recommend this book because it's a standalone. The next book is actually a series that I recommend. I read these books 2 years ago. They are not easy reads, but they are really good books to read. And that is The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings. Let me grab those. Here, I'll just grab the first one. This is The Fellowship of the Ring. These books are not the easiest, but if you've read or if you've watched The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit and you enjoyed it, I definitely recommend picking up the books. J.R. Tolkien is like the foundation of a lot of fantasy novels. He's the reason that a lot of people write fantasy, and a lot of fantasy is really based off of his books. So I definitely recommend it if you are a big fantasy fan. I will say though, the font is puny, and this has been kind of translated in and out of languages a couple of times, and there's like a whole note on the text in the beginning of the book because there's many editions of it because it's been translated a bit. And like J.R. Tolkien made his own words and stuff like that, so there's like some words that you may not recognize, so he kind of has like a glossary in the front. But if you love fantasy and you want to get into it, I definitely recommend these, especially in the fall time. That's when I read them. The vibes are perfect, and it's just adventure fantasy. The next series that I have is a series that I am currently in the middle of, because it is a very long series. It is 8 books, but that is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. A lot of people adore this series, and I mean, how could I not recommend it? Very well-known book, very well-known series. A lot of people have talked about and are super in love with. It is about an assassin named Selena, and you're kind of just following her, figuring out who she is, life, relationships, and just trying to like get her life back kind of situation, because she is not an indentured servant, but like indebted to somebody else named like Arbin. I don't know how to pronounce his name. The names are so hard to pronounce in these books, but I recommend it. I love the series. It's a lot of book, and it's a lot of books, if you know what I mean. Like, they are chunky, but I love them. It's just a lot of information, but I definitely recommend it if you are a fan of fantasy, if you are a fan of this author and you want to read more by this author and you haven't, or if you want like an adventurous YA fantasy that isn't very romance heavy and has fairies. There you go. Next fantasy I'm going to recommend is a duology, and that is The One Dark Window duology by Rachel Gillig, who just announced that she's writing another dark fantasy. I'm so freaking excited. These are so good. The dark fantasy vibes. So amazing. I cannot get enough of it. Personally, my favorite type of fantasy is what I've discovered. I adore this style. It's just very like eerie feeling, woodsy feeling, almost witchy kind of, but there's like dark magic involved, and her writing, so I love it. I could say so amazing so many times, but I highly recommend these two if you have not gotten into them. This one, almost a 5-star. This one a 5-star. It just gets better, and they're both really good. So I definitely recommend. Next one I'm going to briefly touch on because I'm sure you heard of it about 1,000,000,000,000 times. But that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and the next book, which is Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. If you have not read the series yet, I definitely recommend getting into it. Even if you aren't a big fantasy fan, this is really easy to get into. The world building is simple to understand. The book is fast-paced and enticing. You get really into it, like, immediately. The book has no, like, prologue or anything. It just jumps you right into the situation, which I really like, and I definitely recommend this book for a lot of people that are new to the fantasy or want to try fantasy. This one is the next book in this series. It is still easy to understand, but it is a big book. It is long. There's like over 152,000 words in this book, so that's a lot, but this series I feel like is going to be very well loved and well talked about for years to come, and it is in the middle of release right now. Book 3 comes out in January of next year, and it's predicted to be a 5-book series. So it's something to kind of just get yourself excited for as well if you haven't. The next series I'm going to talk about, I have talked about a multitude of times. So it's not going to come to anybody's surprise, but that is Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. I love this series. This screams fall for me. It's about a witch and the 7 princes of hell. Hello? Does it get more interesting than that? No. The vibes are very, like, dark fantasy, but also it's YA, so it's not, like, super spicy or anything. They have to keep it good for the YA. But the book is so good. The story's so good. I ate this up. It got me out of a reading slump. I always recommend this series. And then there's also a spin-off, which is The Princes of Sin. And the first one is Throne of the Fallen. And this one is about Envy and his romance relationship. Because these are all romanticies, essentially. Because that's what you're following, is that. But Envy likes games. And so he kind of recruits, I think her name's Camilla. Am I correct? Yes, Camilla. Camilla to play this game with him. And it's so interesting. I love it so much. The next one's coming out, I think, next month in October. I'm very excited. I have been saying that it is about greed. I am such a liar. Throne of Secrets is about gluttony. I'm awful and such a fake fan for saying the wrong thing this entire time, but it is about gluttony, and I'm super excited. I can't wait for Sloth's book. Sloth is my favorite. But nonetheless, I love this series. I recommend it to legitimately anyone and everyone if you are even slightly into fantasy, because it's so good. And like in the first series, Kingdom of the Wicked, Wrath is hot, angry tattoos, morally gray. Need I say more? You're totally interested. Yeah, last and final series I'm going to talk about in my fall book recs video is going to be books by Stephanie Garber. I'm saying books because she does have 2 series. They are within the same world though. The first one being Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This begins the whole Caraval world and is super interesting. It's about this game called Caraval, and these 2 sisters want to go and they finally get tickets, and it's just following their journey of playing this game. And it's so good. It's so fantastical. It's very whimsical. The writing is very lyrical. Like, when I say that, she describes things in such a colorful way, especially in this series. it's just very colorful descriptions, and she just does such a good job at it. I love this world so much. I highly recommend it. To go along with that, though, the next series is the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. This is a 5-star trilogy for me. I cannot stop thinking about this book, this series, enough. I did tab them when I read them. They're so good. I cannot recommend them enough. It's about Evangeline and Jax. They are the two main characters in this story, and it's just so whimsical. Like, the front cover, they're like UK covers. That's how I would describe this series. Is this. It feels like you're reading, I don't even know how to describe it. It feels like you're reading a fairy tale. That's the best way to describe these books. I don't have the last one yet. I need to get it. But yeah, it feels like you're reading a fairy tale. I can't recommend this series enough. It's just so beautiful, and I can't stop thinking about it. But yeah, so those are all of the books that I recommend to read in the fall. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm sorry for being a bit sporadic. I'm trying to cut out most of my coughing because I am still sick. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one.